Hello. As, I don't think anyone's in chat currently, but as you can see, I was kind of having not so much fun. Well, no, I was because I was muted the whole time, but I was laughing my ass off when I realized that after months of just realizing, there are things I can do in OBS. I can just add fucking images. Big brain me never thought to just add multiple image sources. Because I was like, I have that gif of Toma running backwards down the bridge to save that. It hasn't even been that long since we finished Saber, and I genuinely forgot. Luna, I think that was her name. Then just Dan Kurita from X8 just smiling because I'm close to the end of that. I'm on I think the next episode I have to watch is 42, then all the way up to 45, then there's a couple movies and I'm fully done with it. But anyway, sorry for the 11-day gap. There was a lot happened in those 11 days. I was tired and wanting to do other things, but I'm here now, so let's at least get some of this done. So last time we left off, we practically got confirmation that Beatrice is 100% real. There was kind of no doubt before because, Kraus and Natsuri discovered that the gold is real, but we practically do have even more confirmation at this point. High key, that's legit all I remember. Let me just make sure the audio's... I can up the game a bit. The uncomfortable atmosphere continued even after those two left. It was thick with the idea that simply thinking about the culprit's identity would be the same as deciding whom to suspect. I'm an idiot, I just forgot what actually happened. Natsui and Eva basically nearly turned a shouting match into a cold-blooded murder. How did I forget that entire sequence? And then Jessica had a super violent asthma attack. Now it's coming back to me after reading like that one sentence. It had begun to feel like discussion of the case itself was itself taboo, so no one mentioned the case, at least out loud. However, those thoughts were what filled our minds. All that we couldn't say aloud made our heads feel like they were going to explode. So at least on the outside, the parlor had once again regained its calm mood. Everything was left unsettled.
少しだけ雨足が弱まった気がするね。
まだいっぱい降ってるよ。
仮にやんだって、この島には船がねえんだしな。
Hey Otter, also yeah, the best friends playthrough of Detroit Become Human is a fucking experience. Especially the bit in Marcus's part where you get to We Have a Dream and Wooly yells out loud, "Fuck you, it's the green." I'm gonna be real, this is the only thing I fully remember about that playthrough. It's been 3 years. And I don't think I watched their second gig run where they do it again.
船が明日すぐに来てくれりゃいいんだがよ。洋館バカンさんもうお腹いっぱいだぜ。
母さん、明日船はいつ来るのかな。
本来なら帰りの船は今日の3時に来てくれることになっていました。
Oh, you're right, I forgot they fucking kill Connor at every open chance. I forgot they kill Connor at every chance imaginable.
先方も台風が過ぎてから来直すと電話をしてくれたでしょうが、あいにく電話は普通ですから。でも向こうも子供の使いではありません。客人の方々の送迎目的だと教えてありますから、おそらく明日の朝一番で、多分9時頃くらいに来てくれるでしょう。
It was completely black outside. When I looked at the clock, I realized that it was just past 7. Starting to get hungry. I was starting to get... My brain skipped an entire part of that line. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was cooking enthusiastically. She had laid out a variety of dishes, and while they didn't match the level of Goda's artful cooking, they were still quite gorgeous. I'm gonna go to a restaurant a bit, sorry. Understandable. It was an act of kindness from Kumasawa, who was trying to enliven everyone's low spirits with some food. Kumasawa wasn't nearly as talented as a professional cook like Goda, but she was far from unskilled. On the contrary, since she'd been brought up in a fishing village, the simple food she created was sometimes highly praised. Kanon arranged the food Kumasawa had finished creating on plates under her direction. Kanon also helped in the kitchen sometimes, but since he was rarely placed in that role, he was slightly awkward, even though he tried his best. Self-conscious about the fact that he couldn't cleverly arrange the food, Kanon's expression darkened slightly. But Kumasawa smiled as though everything was fine.
きれいに盛り付けられてますよ。カノン君もお上手ですよ。
シャノン姉さんだったらもっときれいに。
Kanon stopped arranging the food for a bit and hung his head. Shannon was the one who always assisted Kumasawa in her cooking. Tonight, Kanon was doing it instead. And as he remembered Shannon's face in her brutal end, he grimaced. Genji spoke kindly to Kanon as he advanced upon. Nanjo had escaped from the parlor once the mood had grown sour, and Genji had become his opponent in a game of chess upon Nanjo's request.
はい。今は忘れます。
そ それがいいだろ
Genji purposefully refrained from facing Kanon as he spoke. He did so because he understood that it might make things tougher on Kanon if he noticed that someone was looking at his eyes. Nanjo also understood that and held back any thoughtless words.
金蔵さんもどこへ行かれたんでしょうな。ご無事だといいのですが。わかりません。ただ、すべては親方様が望まれ、仕組まれたことのように思っています。それを邪推することは、親方様にお仕えする家具には過ぎたことです。源氏さんは怖くないのですか。私には今夜まだ何か良くないことが起こるような気がして怖いのです。怖いことなど何も。私はただ後ろ宮家にお仕えするだけですので。
Nanjo sighed through his nose and made a carefully considered move. Nanjo was very slightly dubious. Could Genji possibly be thinking he'd be left out of this? He couldn't even imagine what was happening inside this mansion. But he definitely couldn't deny the possibility that Kinzo had devised something. If you liken this island to chess, Kinzo had opened the game, and as a result, 6 pieces have been defeated. Could it be that Genji was calm because he believed he alone was on the outside of the chessboard and therefore safe? Nanjo thought about it. Isn't everyone just a piece on this chessboard, lined up equally, without any exceptions? Wasn't even Genji, who had gained more of Kinzo's trust than anyone, no, who was confident of his position as Kinzo's only close friend, just another one of the pieces laid out on the chessboard?
源氏さん、私は今夜が本当に怖いのです。無事に明日の朝を迎えられることを心より願っています。
The guest room Eva and Hideyoshi moved into had originally been built to house guests before the guest house construction. So until a few years ago, they had stayed in these rooms every family conference and were very familiar with them. This room was just like a room at a hotel, with a bedroom and a bathroom. So even though they were still shut in, it was far more comfortable than the parlor.
やっぱり家族だけだとリラックスできるな。他のみんなも客室にこもって鍵をかけてりゃええんや。
夏日姉さんが客間を出るなって威張り散らしてるんだもん。誰も口答えなんてできないでしょ。あの人ずーっと冷や飯を食ってきたから兄さんが死んでやっと天下が来たって張り切ってんのよ。まったくずうずうしいったら嵐の。
まあそう言うな。夏日さんもあれで結構頑張っとるんやで。お前もそう突っかからんでもええやないか。さっきのレシートの件もあそこまでは言い過ぎやで。
You know, Hideyoshi's pretty understanding considering, his wife almost got murdered. Like, if I were me, I'd be like, first of all, both of y'all out of pocket.
だって あそこで言わなかったらもう言うタイミングがないんだもん。
Eva, sulking cutely and looking at the television, sat alongside Hideyoshi, who was lying on the bed.
でも、こうして二人きりになるのはずいぶん久しぶりよね。
そうやな。思えばわしもお前も老けたもんや。ジョージが生まれてから何もかもがあっという間や。
本当にあっという間よ。子供を作るの焦りすぎたかしら。
Yuva's eyes looked like they were staring off into the distance. Yes, she had thought of it as a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Her older brother Kraus had been able to father a child for quite some time. 6 years passed after his marriage to Natsui without any signs of pregnancy, which didn't please Kenzo at all. Eva herself had thought that, since her name would be moved inside the Ushiramiya register when she got married anyway, it didn't matter whether a successor to the headship was born or not. And then one day, she had a heavenly revelation. Or maybe it was the whisperings of the devil that she had listened to in her greed. If she could give birth to a successor first, wouldn't she be able to remain in the Ushiramiya register? If things went well, might she have a chance to inherit the Ushiramiya family herself? When she proposed this idea to Hideyoshi, he had approved of it instantly. This wasn't because Hideyoshi also had greedy thoughts. For Hideyoshi, who had no close relatives, it was a chance for him to feel once more the long-forgotten thing called family. So when they got married, he hadn't fussed over which last name they were to keep, and quickly agreed to have his name entered into the Ushiramiya family register. It hadn't been easy to persuade Kenzo, but as his daughter Eva knew Kenzo's personality well. So, by choosing the time when Kenzo was most dissatisfied with Natsui, she was magnificently able to make him accept Hideyoshi as an adopted son-in-law. Looking at Hideyoshi, who had achieved success after starting from nothing, Kenzo might have seen a little bit of himself. He quickly grew to like Hideyoshi and approved his transfer into the Ushiramiya register. George would eventually become the successor to the Ushiramiya family. They had raised him strictly with that purpose in mind. He had been worth their while and had grown into a fabulous young man, who wouldn't disappoint no matter where he went. That was why he had not been permitted to fall in love with a servant like Shannon. So when she learned that Shannon was dead and the engagement was now invalid, the part of her had still been shocked by the gruesome crime. Part of her had also been relieved that her dear George wouldn't be stolen by some servant girl. Give me a second. Give me a second. What's the name? What is the name of this fucking image? I keep forgetting it doesn't show by date modified. It shows by date. Actually, no, it shows my name. Nigga, really? Like, nah. That's foul for no reason. Like, come on. Come on.
私クラウス兄さんのことが昔から嫌いだったわ。偉そうで威張ってて、自分がやがては当主になるのだと自慢してて、だからそれに一矢報いてやりたかった。でもそれは子供の頃の感情なのよ。でもその感情は結局自分の人生のほとんどを支配した。それだけならまだいい。その感情はあなたやジョージまで巻き込んで振り回してしまった。
エヴァ、備え自分を責めるな。
Hideyoshi got up and held Eva's shoulder. She could feel a warm understanding from him.
わしはな、自分の人生はもうとっくに折り返しに入っとる。でもな、今日までの生活を後悔したことは一度もないで。一度もや。エヴァと一緒で他の男どもじゃ味わえん楽しい人生になったと思っとる。戦争で身寄りを失ったわしにもう一度家族のぬくもりを教えてくれた。だから後ろ宮の家には感謝しとるし、わしの唯一の家だと思っとる。
Hideyoshi's gonna bite it super hard. Like, I've been saying this since the start, but he's gonna bite it super hard. He's too good of a person. He's too good. Like Shannon, he's too good for this fucking world. He's gonna get it horrible.
わしとお前が歩んできた人生にな、無駄なことなんか何もなかった。今日までほんまに楽しい人生やったで。
ありがとう。
He's too good of a person. Like, there's no way he's getting out of this. Eva hung her head, burying her face in Hideyoshi's chest. Probably no one in the parlor could have even imagined that this side of Eva existed.
感謝するのはわしや。今日までお前と一緒にいて後悔した日なんてあらへん。
私もよ。あなたと一緒になれてよかった。
ジョージももう立派な大人や。わしが見張ってなくてもしっかり仕事ができる一人前や。で、正月あたりをのんびりモルジブあたりで過ごさんか。わしら二人水いらずや。
いやよ。毎年年賀状の返礼で寝る暇もないとか言ってるじゃない。
次の正月だけはなしや。年賀状はみん黙って下のお年玉くじだけチェックするんや。今年はカラーテレビくらい当てたいで。
やだ。モルジブでお年玉くじのチェックなんてしたくない。
じゃあそいつもなしや。水いらずのんびりでジョージが生まれる直前の新婚時代の続きをちょいとしてみんか。
うん、それならいいわね。
モルジブはええとこらしいで。なんもない島に美しいサンゴ礁と水上コテージが並んでてな。
新婚時代の続きっていつからなの？
仕事納めしたらすぐや。旅行店に聞いてみんとわからんが、多分大晦日前には。
いや、今すぐがいい。
Eva nagged at his lips in a peevish yet... Okay, I did read that right. Peevish yet flirtatious manner. The only sounds that... The only sounds that filled the room were the distant voice of the announcer on the news, which Hideyoshi had left on, and the obnoxious pounding of the rain against the window. There was a knock on the door, and Genji-san entered.
奥様、お夕食の準備が整いました。お食事はまたこちらでよろしいですか？
ええ、ここへ運ばせなさい。南條先生はまだ厨房にいるのですか？
はい。
Every time I was really expecting, we haven't been able to find him. Me. He was in the same room.
次の一手を熟考したいとおっしゃっております。ご安心を。
He's gonna get dragged. I'm waiting for this man to get dragged. Just... Where's Nanjo? Oh no.
源氏さんはじい様の相手ができるくらいチェスが強いもんな。南條先生よりも強いらしいぜ。
そうなんだ。昔相手をしてもらったことがあるけど、あれは勝たせてくれたのかな。
マリア、もうすぐ飯だそうだぜ。しかしよく一日中テレビを見ていて飽きねえな。うん、い
つもテレビいっぱい見てるから平気。
マリアちゃんはテレビっ子なんだね。
食事だから机の上を片付けないとダメだぜ。
Earlier, we had torn several pages out of Maria's notebook, and there was now a mess where everyone had been drawing together. Jessica began cleaning that up quickly. Still, everyone here really can draw. I never guessed.
源氏、エヴァさんたちにもせめて食事くらい一緒にしないかとお声をかけなさい。どうせ断るでしょうが。
かしこまりました。
お父様の次はエヴァさんですか。つくづく後ろ宮家の食卓には全員が揃いませんね。
Natsui felt her headache start throbbing again and lightly held her temples. I mean, your argument escalated to you nearly shooting her, so it's kind of understandable for people to want to leave the room. Like, this not something to really stress over, cause, well, no, it is. I'm an idiot. It absolutely is. But you can't go, man, it's difficult to get people to gather when in that situation, yes, you were being treated unfairly, but you pulled the gun over an argument that had little to no weight. Or it had weight, but you're not the guilty party, so it doesn't make sense. I mean, come on now. Wait, hang on. The distance from the kitchen to the parlor wasn't that great, so Genji had gone and come back by himself. But the guest room was a little farther away. Natsui had warned him not to avoid being alone whenever possible. And just now, Nanjo had also admonished him, saying it would be better if he held a little more concern for his safety. Kanon accompanied Genji, and the two of them went to visit Eva and Hideyoshi in the guest room. Genji knocked on the door.
エヴァ様、秀吉様、お夕食の準備が整いました。
You waited a short while for them to come out, but there was no response. Oh no.
源氏様、これは。
They're already fucking gone, aren't they? Kanon pointed under the door. A western envelope had been inserted under it. Normally, when something was inserted this way, it'd be interpreted as a message from someone outside. It'd be interpreted as a message from someone outside to someone in the room. So, since this might be a private note meant for Eva and Hideyoshi, it was not something that Kanon and Genji were supposed to take interest in. But this western envelope was one of Kinzo's, the same kind as the one Maria had taken out last night and surprised everyone with.
間違いない。親方様の封筒だ。
あるいは。
Even though this was one of Kinzo's envelopes, the letter Maria read aloud the previous night hadn't come from Kinzo. Genji continued knocking a little harder and called out in a loud voice.
エヴァ様、源氏でございます。いらっしゃいますか。お返事をお願いいたします。エヴァ様。
But there was no response from inside. Oh shit. Sometimes when the servants went to call some guests for a meal, the guests would be sleeping so deeply they wouldn't wake up. In times like that, the servants would stick a letter in the door to show that it was time to come out and leave the guests be. But despite that, Genji beat even harder on the door and called out Eva's name. However, there was no answer. Kanon stuck his ear up to the door, held his breath, and listened for any sounds coming from inside.
テレビの音らしきものが。でも気配が感じられません。お部屋は空っぽかも。
Where'd they go? Genji took out a handkerchief and carefully, not to touch it with his bare hand, gently pulled out the envelope that had been stuck under the door. It was sealed with a deep red sealing wax. Without a doubt, the mark on that sealing wax had come from the Ushiramiya family head's ring.
エヴァ様、エヴァ様、どうかお返事を。もうお部屋にはいらっしゃいませんか。
But there was still no answer. There was a chance those two were aimlessly walking around the mansion. This was the home Eva had grown up in. There was plenty of reason to think she had gone out on such a casual stroll. Genji groped around in his pocket and pulled out a bundle of keys, which contained the key that would open the guest room. Kanon also understood what this meant. They would sometimes unlock the doors so they could go in and do things like make the beds, but only after they made sure the guests were out. To unlock the door for any other reason, and especially to do so when there was a chance the guests hadn't given permission and might still be in there, was an action unbecoming of a servant. But Genji had decided. If the only problem had been that his knock hadn't received a reply, he wouldn't have gone this far. But the envelope under the door was doubtlessly one of Kinzo's. Or rather, one of the western envelopes of the Ushiramiya family had. After last night, the sender of this envelope could be someone other than Kinzo. If this letter had been sent by someone else...
申し訳ございません。お部屋を失礼させていただきます。
After giving that final notice, Genji stuck one of the keys from the bundle into the keyhole. There was the sound of the door unlocking, and after slowly turning the knob, he slowly started opening the door. Light seeped through the crack of the door. Were they in the room? Or had they forgotten to turn out the lights? It was the sound of the door chain being pulled tight. The chain had been secured. The chain couldn't be secured from the outside, so it had also proved that they were in the room. The sound of the voices in the TV seeped out of the room. The lights, the chain, and the TV. All of these things made it clear that they were in the room, but there was no sign of them. Genji called the evil once again through the crack of the door, but there was no answer.
Genji-sama, いかがしますか?
As part of their jobs, the servants were able to unlock almost any lock in the mansion, but they had no way to open a door with a chain. The only way to get by a chain was to cut it. That was certainly not permitted of a servant's usual work. A creepy chill had already rushed up their backs. Kanon held his breath again and tried to sense someone through the door, but even so, he was not able to sense anyone.
私は奥様をお呼びしてくる。カノンのチェーンの切断を。
はい。
As Kanon hurried away to get a cutting tool, Genji called him to a stop.
待てカノン。厨房に戻り、熊沢と行動するよう。断じて一人で行動してはならんぞ。
はい、かしこまりました。
It looked like Kanon was wondering why he had to do something so troublesome in the middle of this urgent situation. But Genji had said it out of wariness. He didn't care what happened to himself, but in the worst case scenario, he didn't want anything to happen to Kanon. In the kitchen, Kumasawa was piling food on the serving cart. Nanjo was waiting for Genji, apparently wanting to show him a move he'd finally thought up that might turn the tables on him. But Genji's appearance immediately told him that something was wrong.
おや、どうしましたか、源氏さん。
南條先生、申し訳ありませんが、この勝負は一度中断させてください。カノンはチェーンを頼む。熊沢、食事の配膳は一時中断し、カノンと同行するよう。私は奥様のところへ行く。南條先生もご一緒に。
何かあったんですか?
Genji took Nanjo, who still didn't know what was going on, and quickly left the kitchen.
熊沢さん、申し訳ありませんが、僕と一緒に来てください。
何があったんですか、カノンさん。
Kumasawa said almost exactly the same thing as Nanjo, unable to take in the situation, and chased after Kanon, who had flown out into the hallway. Taking Kumasawa with him, Kanon went to a storage room and looked through the tools packed in toolboxes and hanging all over the walls, trying to find something that could be used to cut the chain.
何を探してるんですか？私も手伝いますよ。
ドアチェーンを切断するんです。大きめの番線カッターはどこだっけ？
ドアチェーンを？どうしてそんなことをするんですか？
エヴァ様たちのお部屋にチェーンが中にいらっしゃるはずなのに、お声をかけても返事がないんです。
It took Kumasawa some time to figure out how cutting the chain and Hideyoshi not answering were connected, but she did realize that this was an urgent situation.
これなら多分。
Kanon took down a very large wire cutter that had been hanging on the wall. It was called a cutter, but maybe it'd be easier to understand if we said it was shaped like a large pair of pliers. Kanon remembered once being warned that this dangerous tool could easily cut through one of your fingers. Kanon took that and rushed up the stairs. He already knew instinctively. He should fight for every minute, every second to open it quickly. Or perhaps it was already...
待ってください、カノンさん。
早く。
Kumasawa eventually caught up with him, gasping for breath with both hands on her knees. When Kanon changed his grip on the wire cutters and looked up at the door, he let out an ah, struck speechless. Oh, shit.
なんですかこれは。
Kumasawa screamed weakly, her face pallid. That was no surprise, because right there on the door, just like the magic circle that had been drawn on the shutter of the Rose Garden storehouse, there was another eerie shape drawn with a blood-like paint. However, it would be odd to call this one a magic circle, because unlike what most people would expect, it wasn't a magic circle with shapes drawn inside it, but a slightly more complicated geometrical shape. However, those strange characters filling in the gaps, which weren't from the alphabet, were the same kind as the ones on that magic circle on the shutter. But the thing that had Kano struck speechless wasn't how eerie the magic circle was. It was that something like this hadn't been here a short while ago. First, he had taken a trip back to the kitchen. After that, he'd gone to the storage room to grab a tool and headed right back. Put those together and it couldn't have been more than 5 minutes. How could someone add something this creepy during that period of time? And as though it had just been drawn, almost like the door itself was bleeding, several unsettling vertical red lines slowly dripped down, getting longer and longer. Kumasawa's knees gave way and she sank down on the spot. If Kumasawa hadn't done this first, then Kanon surely would have wanted to.
ベアトリーチェ様。
ベアトリーチェ様の仕業ですよ。恐ろしや恐ろしや。
Kanon gulped, then readied the wire cutter and approached the door. He didn't want to get close to this disturbing magic circle, and he really didn't want to touch the steadily dripping substance that looked like blood. But if he didn't get close, he wouldn't be able to cut the chain. Fighting this cold feeling, he gulped again, and after gathering his courage, he went even closer, putting the wire cutter up against the chain. He then pressed with all his strength, managing to cut through the chain far more easily than he'd anticipated. The cut chain fell into two separate parts, which continued to clang as they swayed back and forth.
カノンさん、足元に封筒が。しかもこれは親方様のもの。
It looked like Kumasawa had also noticed the western envelope at the bottom of the door, and that the ceiling had been sealed with the head's ring. Kanon hesitated for just a second over whether he should open the letter first or check inside the room, but he eventually decided on fulfilling his original purpose. Kanon pulled a handkerchief out of his pocket. This was so he wouldn't leave fingerprints on the door. If his worst fears were realized, the police would want to investigate this room too. He slowly pushed the door open. He was able to more clearly hear the sound of the television, which had been seeping out faintly this whole time.
エヴァ様。
Eva was lying face up on the bed. On a bed with her shoes still on. Kumasawa, who had fearfully entered after Kamon was hiding behind his back, screamed a short eek when she saw Eva like that. Eva's shoes had been the first part of her that Kanon had seen, so the oddness of her wearing shoes in bed was the first thing to strike him. But when Eva's head shifted into his line of sight, Kanon couldn't help but let out a short scream like Kumasawa. Right in the middle of Eva's forehead, something had been placed? Something was growing there? No. Right in the center of her forehead. Was it an old-fashioned knife? That or some weapon like it was sticking out. At the base of where it was stuck in, blood dripped down, staining the sheets on the other side bright red. Kumasawa's knees gave way once more and she sank down on the floor. Her mouth kept flapping open and closed, but she couldn't even scream. Eva was dead, with some kind of weapon sticking out of her forehead. Both eyes were open wide, and the image of the person who killed her must have been burned into them. But the only mouth capable of naming that person had been shut for all eternity. Also, hey Alex, you came in. At least you made yourself noticed by the time shit started going down again. As soon as they reaffirm Hideyoshi's a good person, this has to happen. I knew it. It's only a matter of time before we find out how he was done in. Even though her forehead was the last place they wanted to look, they couldn't tear their eyes from it. Right there, the weapon was stuck into Eva's forehead, standing almost perfectly upright. And on the handle was a complicated design that you wouldn't expect to see on an ordinary weapon. That thing could be summed up with the word occult. It was a vulgar object with a design that might have been some demon. They're gonna do this man so bad, I already feel it. Eva was on top of her bed, but the other bed was empty. Where was Hideyoshi? After taking a backwards glance at Kumasawa, still on her knees and stupefied, he checked the bathroom just in case. At the moment he opened the door, he was greeted by steam and the sound of the shower. The bathroom was of the same familiar style as most hotel bathrooms. When taking a shower, a waterproof curtain was used to keep the water from flying out. That waterproof curtain was half open, and lying tumbled down in the bathtub was Hideyoshi, completely naked with both eyes open, and pointing right at Kanon. With a knife! Alex, no! Just like Eva, a weapon with the demon-like design was stuck into his forehead. Since his head had been under the shower's hot water this whole time, his face wasn't half covered and filthy with blood like Eva's had been. But the sight of him dead while still taking a shower was tragic enough. Just then, they heard Natsui's voice coming from the hall. She was probably coming with Genji. You know, I can at least be thankful this one seemed tame in comparison to like the first 6. Cause high-key, I'd rather know someone died getting stabbed in the head than, you know, getting brutalized, losing like half or all their face with their gums turned inside out. Or something to that effect. Oh, did I skip the voice clip? Mad, Hideyoshi-sama is here too. Kanon gripped his handkerchief and twisted the valve, turning off the shower. In the bathtub, a small jar of body soap had fallen with its cap off. It really looked like he'd been attacked while taking a shower. There was still a small splash of blood clinging to the white bathtub, and the combination of red and white made a horrible contrast.
わかったな。死犯は出とらんな。死後硬直も始まっとらん。おそらく殺されてから1時間経ったかどうかというところだろう。しかしこのような柄の短い凶器で頭蓋骨を考えられん。
Manjo checked their pulse and their pupils, making certain of their deaths once more. As Kanon watched this business-like treatment, he thought, couldn't you tell at a glance they were dead without doing all that? Manjo thought about removing the weapon, but then decided it would be better to preserve the scene and hand it over to the police, so he left it alone. But a close inspection on the base showed that it didn't have a blade. In fact, it was more conical than blade-shaped. He noticed that, rather than a knife, it was like a short-handed spear, something with a shape better suited for thrusting than slicing. Rather than a short spear, you might call it a thick ice pick. At any rate, after looking at the scene, no further words were needed to describe what sort of terrible purpose such eerily designed weapons were originally made for. Nor was it necessary to explain how they would carry out their function. Natsui, hoping to escape the repulsive steam filling the bathroom as soon as she could, covered her mouth with a handkerchief and dashed from the room. Just viewing their gruesome bodies for an instant had been enough to burn the image into her eyes. If she looked any longer, that image would surely remain in her vision for all eternity. The rising urge to vomit was exactly the same feeling she'd had this morning at the gardening storehouse. For a while, Natsui couldn't help but stand with her back facing the guest room, fighting that sickness in her stomach. They're already gonna be here, aren't they? They could tell that those fiercely racing footsteps in the hallway belonged to George even before he came dashing into the room. George and the other children had been waiting in the parlor. However, when they saw Genji speak to Natsui, when they saw her turn pale and fly out of the parlor, they'd felt a strange sense of foreboding. And when they saw a large group of people gathered around the guest room, they were sure of it.
Tosa! Tosa!
なんだよこれまた魔法陣かよ
エヴァおばさんたちは無事なんだよなおいカノ君これは何の騒ぎなんだ
バトラ様
Kanon didn't have to say anything. George's scream after he ran into the room told them everything they needed to know. Can't keep hurting my boy like this, man.
誰がこんなことを殺してやる殺してやる
ジョージ君しっかり
Natsui touched George's shoulder with her hand, but he violently shook her off. George fell over beside Eva, and buried his face in bed in front of his mother's face, wailing. Then he pounded on the bed with his fist over and over again.
ジョージ兄さんしっかりバトラ
トラ様。
Battler had his back against the wall of the hallway and was covering his eyes with his right hand and weeping without restraint.
ひでえぜ。心に決めた女を婚約した次の日に失った。同じ日に親父とおふくろまで殺されるなんてよ。そんなのあんまりにも無謀じゃねえか。
Of course it's sad when anyone dies, no matter who it is. But to Battler, those left alone by the deaths of the others were far more worthy of pity. Everyone here now had lost someone close to them. George wasn't the only one to be pitied. However, George's pain was far greater than everyone else's.
バトラー。
そりゃよ、人はいつか死ぬぞ。人間誰だっていつか死別の悲しみと戦わなきゃならねえ日が来るだろうよ。でもよ、そいつは兄貴にとってはずっと未来の話で、しかもそいつは一つずつ順番に訪れるべきもんじゃねえかよ。無ごすぎるぜ。やろうやろう。少しは人の情けってもんがねえのかよ。
バトラ、泣かない泣かない。
Maria tried to comfort Battler in a mechanical sounding voice. Battler violently wiped his tears.
くそ、もう流さないぜ。悔しい涙も悲しみの涙ももう二度と流さねえぜ。ああ、全然ダメだ。
You didn't know this was all the same day? Yeah. Yeah, what? Fuck. Like, I know I've been reading it the whole time, but I'm sitting there like, you're right. Like it was, because they found out that morning, like early in the morning, Maria needs to get, yeah.
俺たちは魔女様に爪を食らってるわけだ。主勢一方ってわけだ。そりゃダメだぜ。全然ダメだ。チェス盤がひっくり返っちまうぜ。野郎は俺たち羊が明日まで逃げる手段もなく怯えてるだけだろうと思ってるだろうよ。だからひっくり返すぜ。明日までこの島から逃げられねえのは野郎も同じだ。しょんべんちびりそうになりながら逃げ隠れするのは俺たちじゃねえ。野郎の方だ。暴いてやるぜ。必ずな。明日までに。いや、明日なんか待たねえ。今夜だ。
Felt like a few days had already passed. Yeah.
その胸ぐらを掴み上げてやる。
To be fair, Alex, with how long these segments go on, I can totally understand. I can completely understand why both of us feel like it's been days. Because I thought it was days too, and then I remembered, oh yeah, the clock shows, because whenever a day passes, they just outright tell you in game. Because, like, we're still pretty much on the second day.
「とにかくこの部屋は警察が来るまでこのままにして施錠します。いいですね。
Natsui announced it as though she didn't care whether they agreed or not. If anyone had a right to object, it would have been George, but he looked as though he'd shed enough tears. George nodded slightly, still facing away from the others. And when he stood up, everyone else agreed too. Natsui still hadn't opened that western envelope with the heavenly heads that she picked up. But now that they'd decided to leave this room, she decided to unseal it in the parlor where everyone could watch. Wait, people have gone to sleep and done a variety of stuff within the span of 24... Yeah? Just within the span of 24 hours, 8 people now have died. 6 very gruesomely, and 2 in a very... still gruesome, but not as gruesome way, in my opinion, but still pretty painful. Like, George and Battler have had 2 breakdowns. Maria has turned into Satan twice. Maria's turned into Satan twice. Ava almost got fucking shot by Natsui. Like, that's a very packed 24 hours. As soon as they walked out into the hallway to head back to the parlor, some of them immediately felt something out of place, or maybe sensed something strange.
答えよ。
マリアもわかるか。
Whose corpse is it?
こりゃ何の匂いだよ。ひでえ匂いだぜ。
Is it Kenzo's corpse? When everyone sniffed the air, they did notice a horrible burnt smell drifting through the hallway, one that none of them had smelled until then.
私、ちょっと厨房を見てきます。
No wonder why the anime is like 50 episodes they draw. I was after like 3. Yeah.
火はちゃんと消したはずなんですよ。
Who's dead in the kitchen? After noticing a burnt smell, it was natural that Kumasawa, who had just been using the burner in the kitchen, suspected that her own slip-up had caused it. Kumasawa hastily dashed away.
カノン、熊沢と行きなさい。一人にさせないように。
はい。
After nodding at Genji's order, Kanon followed after her. He wasn't running, but as he followed her, he tried to search for the cause of the smell in other directions as well.
臭い。
これは確かに鼻が曲がりそうな匂いですね。しかし換気のために窓を開けてもいいものか。
Natsui was reluctant to open the windows in a situation where self-defense was so important.
換気扇を回させましょう。窓を開ける必要はないと思います。
Splitting up is yeah, like a high key. They've been literally throwing that in our face since the shed. Just, yo, we need to stay together. No.
ジョージの兄貴、話しかけても大丈夫かよ。
犯人を探す相談なら構わないよ。
It seemed that George had managed to climb out of the abyss of sorrow. All that filled his chest now was the quiet flame of hatred towards the culprit who had stolen the lives of the one he loved and his beloved parents.
部屋にはチェーンがかかってた。
I get Maria as a kid, but she's Taiki tone deaf to the gravity. Yeah.
さっき構造を見たが、とても外から細工できる代物じゃねえ。
She really said, damn, my auntie and mom are dead? That's crazy. Damn. She really just kind of reaction of, damn. Insane. Who would do such a thing?
つまり完璧な密室だったってことだ。
そうなるね。バラ庭園の倉庫の時はシャッターの鍵を使用人室からこっそりと持ち出したのだろうとか、あるいは複製の鍵を持っていた可能性とか、いくつか方法が想像できた。でもチェーンは違う。
Hideyoshi and Evil were a thing? I'm so sure. Yeah, they made George. Alex, they made George. They were George's parents. I have to remember. Not everyone was here when I started it, but yeah, they were his parents. They were his parents the whole time. And again, like I said, they had to remind me of how good of a person Hideyoshi is before they took him away again. Well, not again. Before they took him away. Sitting here like he was gonna get taken the first time they spared him. Second time someone gets taken, I'm like, they took the man. They took the good Chad dad. They took the Chad dad away from me. Why would you do this?
チェーンは一般に浸透した施錠方法の中で最もシンプルに密室を構築できる。
チェーンだけは物理的に破壊しない限り外からはどうにもならないぜ。じゃあつまり犯人は扉からは出入りしなかったってことなのか。
Eva was clearly a gold digger. Well, actually, according to the scene before they died, nah, she genuinely loves that man. Which I could say good on her, but at the same time, she did have the gold digger vibes. Like, not even, that wasn't even vibes. She just kind of had the gold digger personality. Then it's like, nah, she actually likes the man. Which is a very, it's both something I could say is, I guess, nice, but also kind of, huh. It's like, it's one of those things where I'm like, I feel like could be an essence. Yeah.
こりゃ面白い。つい数時間ほど前にも扉以外でどうやって部屋から出入りしたのかってみんなで騒いだ気がするぜ。
I guess what I'm trying to say, it's one of those, wait, you have a soul? Like, deep down you love your little brother. Right, that is true. I can't say that it's false. Back then, we were all losing our cool, wondering how grandfather had disappeared from his room. The receipt Aunt Eva had stuck in the door on a whim proved that the door remained sealed. And since Aunt Natsui was the only person to enter or exit during that time, she was under suspicion. Aunt Eva proposed a theory about how Aunt Natsui might have thrown grandfather out the window and left by the door herself. But this door was much simpler. It was sealed from the inside by the door chain. The window had also been locked from the inside, and the bodies had been inside the room. This time it really had been, without exaggeration, a true closed room. That's right. If you include grandfather's disappearance, 3 cases have occurred, and all 3 times the door has been the point of interest. First was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume... Oh. The first was the shutter. There was a key in the servant room, and if we assume someone knew about that, this can't really be called a closed room. The next was the door sealed by the receipt. However, Aunt Natsui entered that room, so if Grandfather had left through the window or had been thrown out, she would have been able to... I didn't press anything that time. I didn't even press anything that time. So if Grandfather had left through the window or been thrown out, she would have been able to lock the window before escaping. Or like my theory, Grandfather could have hidden until the receipt was gone and then left the room later. Basically, this door can be defeated with a handful of desperate tricks. In that sense, you can't really call this one a closed room either. And now we have the door sealed with the door chain. Finally we have to give up. The window, the door, everything had been locked. It was a perfect closed room. The first hadn't been a closed room because everyone could be suspected. The second hadn't been a closed room because Aunt Natsui could be suspected. But this time no one can be suspected. This was a perfect closed room, and because the door chain formed a seal that blocked everyone equally well...
なら、犯人は室内に入らずに犯行に及んだ。
I mean, they very well could have, but I feel like someone would have noticed a hole in the wall or, breaks in the windows at that point. So, Beatrice really just kind of warped in, stabbed them both, and went, "Be easy." Be easy. We're dead. Be easy.
部屋の外から何らかの方法で
Just goofy die. We didn't even do anything. Goofy.
確かに。
And it's not like they could... Yeah, and it's not like they could have been dragged out, killed, and then put back in, because they were already in the room to start with. Then there'd be no point. That'd just be a lot of extra effort.
チェーンである以上、人が通れるほどは開けなくても多少の隙間を空けることができる。ノックして顔を覗かせたところを襲うとか。
I mean, for the murder that's certainly possible, but then how would that explain how Eva was able to get back to the bed and Hideyoshi was able to get to the shower? Because you just don't, you don't just exit a shower, get stabbed in the head, and then just go, well, warp. I die clean.
いや、甘いか。
甘いよな。エヴァおばさんの遺体が扉のすぐそばだったなら、それも考えたぜ。
Yeah, I was about to say, you don't just kind of warp when you die, you just die. I was about to say, be some shit if people just started teleporting when they die.
だが、エヴァおばさんは部屋の奥のベッドの上。しかも、秀吉おじさんはバスルームだった。チェーンの隙間からでは姿を見ることもできねえし、手を伸ばすこともできねえ。ちくしょう、全然ダメだぜ。さっぱりだ。
Something was tugging softly at my sleeve. It was Maria. It's gonna be the face. Okay.
満足?
I was all... my next sentence was literally gonna be, I thought it was gonna be like that satanic face, like the one where it was like the super zoom in with like the bloodshot eyes and the demon smile, like the one CG again, and then she just up and says satisfied. And then I realized the thing Battler said earlier about, yo, please make this murder look inhuman so I don't have to believe one of us did it, came true. I'm mad I forgot about that until I read that. I'm really mad at myself because now I'm just forgetting key details until, oh, this is about to get brought up, isn't it? They stabbed him and tossed him back. That'd be some shit. Just, well, we couldn't get through the door. How'd you put him back in the shower? Stabbed him and then I just kind of pushed him. There is a highly specific angle. You mean to tell me you killed him and then proceeded to put... Yes. That was a big nigga. You sure? Yes. My aim is immaculate. Oh, okay. There it is. I was about to say, you don't just kind of butt into that and then go, satisfied. Without becoming the demon again. I blame her. Alex Heike, at this point, like at this point, you know what? I may hop on that train too. Because at first it was like, oh, adorable little girl. She just likes witchcraft. It's very, very concerning. But no, nothing super nothing turbo horrible come out of it. Yes, everything turbo horrible came out of it. I tapped Maria, who was laughing unpleasantly, on the head with my fist.
Oh, 叶えてくれてありがとうよ。今のはその礼と、不謹慎な時に笑ったことへの教育的指導だ。
100%. I'm 100% saying Beatrice possessed her to kill them. I'm running with it. But Alex, here's the thing, though. I can't... Well, to be fair, we're dealing with ghosts and witches here. So we're most definitely dealing with magic. Like, if she isn't possessed, she's a cult member. Yeah. Because I was gonna say, like, if she was possessed, she would still leave fingerprints because she's using a living body. And even then, if Maria was able to do it, this would imply that she could just levitate shit and just hasn't been doing it for some reason. Which would feel very weird for like a 9-year-old to have powers and then just not use them.
それより教えやがれ。エヴァおばさんたちの部屋の扉にもまた怪しげな落書きがされていた。あれもまた魔法陣なのか。
あれは特に覚えやすい特徴的な形なんだから、あのくらい知っててほしいね。
知らねえから花を持たせてやってんだ。ごちゃごちゃ言わねえで解説しろい。
バトラは暴力的だね。あんまり意地悪すると教えないよ。
He's like, I'm gonna keep doing it. just what if she killed them and got back to the room undetected? The mansion may have shortcuts. I mean, Alex, it's true, but they literally just got done explaining it was perfectly locked. Like, literally no human could have gotten in. And again, even if this is a case of possession, unless it's like full reign of the witch powers go into the possessed body, which we still don't even know if this is even what's happening. She would just go ghost through the door and then just go ghost out. I mean, that may be the case, but at the same time, I feel like it's just a case of, yo, Beatrice here, kill, Beatrice out.
あれは月の一の魔法陣だよ。
Just deck her like a boxer that'll shut her. Oh no! Well, welcome to my stream where we end up advertising punching children in some fashion, whether it be, no matter the genre, whether it be beat-em-ups, whether it be fighting games, or visual novels now, sometimes punching the child is okay.
何の意味がある？その魔法陣のご利益は？書かれてるヘブライ語の意味は？
記されているのは旧約聖書詩編第107編の16節。
Battle using gorilla watch. Muffled sounds of gorilla violence.
主は聖堂の扉を破り、鉄の缶抜きを打ち破ってくださいました。魔法陣の効用は2つ。1つはいかなる方法によって閉ざされた扉でも開くことができる。
So they did just go and ghost through the door.
そりゃ便利な魔法だぜ。つまり魔法の力に頼らなきゃ開けぬ密室の扉っていう魔女様のアピールってわけか。もう一つの効用は？
開かぬ扉を八方塞がりの事態に見立て扉を開く。難解な事態の時に用いることで、それまで思いつきもしなかった解決策を与えてくれるんだよ。
She started getting slapped and now it takes a punch to resolve these issues, unsorted issues, the irony. Yeah. I just want the child that goes ooh back. I miss the speech impediment kid. Bring her back again, please.
平たく言うと、観察力や洞察力、ひらめきや直感を授けてくれるんだね。ベアトリーチェはバトラごとき人間風情にこの扉の開き方がわかるものかって挑発してるんだよ。
よ
Good work. Shut up. It's truly a tragic here. Okay, good work. Shut up.
上等だぜ。その魔女の挑戦
Just Battler.
受けてやら。
Battler just, okay, good. Fuck away from me.
マリアちゃん、この世に魔女も悪魔も存在しない。父さんと母さんは誰かが殺した。それが僕のよく知る人間なのか知らない人間なのかはわからない。でもそのどちらであっても必ず人間なんだ。
しかしどうやって？せいぜい10センチ程度しか開かない扉の隙間からどうやったら室内の2人を？
それにしても耐え難い匂いです。
Oh yeah, whose corpse is in the kitchen?
一体何事なのですか？
I genuinely forgot. Realized the smell wasn't coming from the kitchen even before they arrived. Okay. Kano and Kumasawa, who had gone ahead, realized the smell wasn't coming from the kitchen even before they arrived. That's because they noticed an even thicker wave of stench rising up from the stairs leading to the basement, which they passed on their way to the kitchen.
ボイラー室。
またボイラーの調子が悪いんでしょうか。
I'm waiting for them to run in and it just explodes. Those stairs led to the underground boiler room. The mansion's boiler was old and in poor condition. Both of them had witnessed problems with the boiler on several occasions, but they had never smelled a boiler belching out a stench like this before. Slam.
今の音は
The thing they heard from the basement was definitely the sound of a door closing. Kumasawa had phrased it as a question, but she already knew it couldn't be anything else. They better, yeah. Kumasawa was so surprised at that sound that her knees gave way yet again and she cowered. After all, at that very moment, no one could have been in the boiler room. Just a few seconds ago, everyone had been crowded together around Hiva and Hideyoshi's room. So who caused the sound of a door closing just now?
Kanon-san!
After taking a second to sort out the situation, Kanon ran down towards the basement. Well, this brother's about to be gone too. Hate to see it. Since they'd heard the sound of a door closing just now, and there was no sign of anyone coming up the stairs, the person who'd closed the door had to be inside the boiler room now. If the boiler room had been a dead end, Kanon wouldn't have rushed in so hastily. But Kanon was a servant, so he knew. There were two entrances to the boiler room, one that opened to the mansion and one that opened to the courtyard. If he didn't chase them now, they might slip away. Kumasawa will reach the same conclusion long after Kanon did. But she couldn't let him go alone. If the thing in the boiler room was the culprit, an opponent who had easily killed 6 adults in the first murder, then no matter how Kanon confronted them, he still wouldn't be a match. Of course, with this argument, even if Kumasawa joined him, it wouldn't change anything. At any rate, after a delay, Kumasawa decided that she mustn't let Kanon go alone and she rushed down the stairs. At that time, Kanon was already in the boiler room. The boiler room's characteristic damp heat tormented him. It had always been an unpleasantly smelly and hot place. And on top of that, the room was full of that horrible stench which made Kanon feel like he was going to be sick. There was no doubt that this room was the source. No way if she falls down the stairs. Oh, that'd be foul. That'd be like, I don't know why it's a running joke with me now at some point, like, whether it's Discord calls or anything. I just go, oh yeah, what if someone's falling down the stairs, or I've had friends who've claimed to, not even claimed to have thrown people down the stairs, and it's just one of those, you know, throwing people down the stairs comes up a lot recently in my life, and I don't know. However, Kanon kept gazing straight forward as he grabbed a hatchet from the tool shelf just off to the side of the door. He hadn't stretched out his hand because he'd wanted a hatchet. He had wanted to grab a weapon. Any weapon. Why? Kanon gazed into the darkness, where the naked light bulb couldn't pierce. Then, he answered.
ルーレットは数字と赤黒にかけて配当を競い合う。だが赤か黒かのようなリスクの低い賭けはその程度の配当しか与えられない。
The words coming from Kanon's mouth were swallowed up by the darkness. That darkness suddenly started to swirl, glittering. It was such a fantastical scene. Golden sparkling butterflies that hid in the shadows all over the boiler room flapped their wings, twinkling beautifully, and gathered in the darkness, disappearing. Kanon continued speaking, directing his words at the darkness as it swallowed the butterflies up. But as the butterflies gathered in the darkness, they probably, they would certainly laugh. But Kanon continued to speak without faltering in the slightest.
逆により的中率の低いかけ方をすればそのリスクに比例した配当が与えられる親方様は天文学的なリスクを的中できることを奇跡とよその結果得られる天文学的な配当を魔法と呼んでいた
However, if you bet on something with a lower probability, your payoff increases proportional to the risk. The master called succeeding despite an astronomical risk a miracle, and called the astronomical payoff gained as a result magic.
親方様とお前がどんな魔法を求めてルーレットに挑んでいるのかそんなことしかしお前は忘れている
Keep skipping dialogue by fucking accident.
ルーレットには赤でも黒でもない目が出うることを忘れている
Roulette has a special pocket called Zero, which means the house takes everything in certain variants of the game. This means that all of the coins bet on the table will be swept up just as though everyone is forfeit.
僕は一つだけ心に決めていたもしシャノンが殺されて僕が生き残るようなことがあったならこの身を投げ出してお前のルーレットを全て台無しにしてやろうとこれは親方様が決めたルールでもましてやお前が決めたルールでもないこのルールは僕が作った僕はもう家具じゃないお前のルーレットのゼロなんだ
Kanon's face twisted with humiliation. It was clear that his defiance against his own weakness was being ridiculed somehow. Kanon's brows creased even further, and a fierce expression that he'd never shown to anyone appeared on his face. The hand grasping the hatchet was shaking. His sweat became drops which slid downward. It was clear that the emotion causing Kanon's hand to shake wasn't just anger. However, Kanon suppressed that emotion.
僕はもうお前の言葉に惑わされたりはしない
Bro, you may be a real one, but you're not a superhero. You're going to die.
悪魔のルーレットはこれでおしまいだ地獄にてさらに1000年次の召喚者を待つがいいベアドリーチェ
When Kanon raised the hatchet and tried to dive into the darkness definitely sneered. It sneered at that courage as if it were vulgar, lazy, futile, and meaningless. Oh shit. Kanon, his hatchet still held aloft, couldn't take another step after that. With a clang, the hatchet that he'd been grasping fell and rolled on the floor. And following that with a pair of thuds, Kanon's knees hit left then right. That hand, which looked like it was trying to catch the sky, now that the hatchet had been dropped, gradually lowered, landing on his chest. Then the other did the same. Right there, a handle with a demon-shaped design was buried into his The same type of weapon that had been stabbed into Eva and Hideyoshi's foreheads was in Kanon's chest. Kanon was curled up in anguish, fresh blood dribbling from the corner of his mouth. It was makeup too extreme for Kanon's white skin. Around this scene, the glittering gold butterflies danced through the darkness, mesmerizing. It was a beautiful, beautiful dance, a funeral march of tribute, ridicule, and contempt for a single boy's self-sacrifice. Kanon had already been prepared for his own death. But although he could do nothing but accept the death that he had received, he attempted one last measure of resistance. He grasped at the handle of the weapon sticking into his chest with both hands, and gritting his teeth with an acute, unearthly pain, he pulled it out. For only a moment, the bright red spray gushed out. It made an unsettling bloop sound. It probably resembled the sound of Kanon's soul as it was sucked into the swamp of the dead. That is a phrase.
Kanon-san? Dareka!
Kumasawa screamed at the incomprehensible sight in front of her. Kanon was lying in a pool of blood. Kumasawa's heart was a complete mess. Oh, what a horrible fate. He wouldn't have been killed if I had been with him. Oh, what incredible luck. If I had been with him, I might have been killed too. As she screamed, her expression was filled with complete confusion, and all of the muscles in her face were pulled up, almost as though she was smiling while crying. But no one could have made fun of an expression like this. First one to dash in was Natsui holding the rifle. Battler and Genji dashed in after her. Normally, they probably would have started discussing the origin of that violent stench filling the boiler room. But after they saw Kanon, who was lying on the ground as if he was drowning in an ocean of his own blood, the stench wasn't important anymore. Natsui realized that even though Kanon was on the verge of death, he was still conscious, so she sent Genji to get the doctor. Natsui, holding the rifle aloft, faced the darkness in the center of the boiler room and shouted, Battler, thinking quickly, took a large flashlight from the tool shelf alongside the door and used this light to cut through the darkness Natsui was glaring to. But the light only shone on mechanical-looking piping and a door. The door had been left open with a small crack, and it was obvious that someone had left through there in a hurry.
Genji, あの扉はどこに通じているのですか?
中庭です。
逃がすかよ。くそこの野郎。
Battler let out a war cry as he slammed into the door. Cool air from outside suddenly rushed in. There was some thin, rough stairs leading up. Battler ran up them shouting. Natsui was also rushing up the stairs, chasing after Battler. They were in the courtyard. The courtyard of the mansion had been built strictly for lighting purposes, so it wasn't a very elegant place. Because it was surrounded on all sides, the air was calm and completely undisturbed, even though they could hear the sound of strong winds. There was only the gentle, sorrowful rain. As he ran through the cold and scattered raindrops, dashing up the stairs into the courtyard, Battler looked in every direction. Of course, the odds of him finding a suspicious silhouette just standing around nonchalantly were pretty much zero. Battler spun, looking all around. He turned again and again. He kept spinning until he almost lost his sense of direction. He prayed that he would see the culprit somewhere in the scenery, but there was no chance. All he saw as he spun was more and more of the mansion's heartless walls and windows. Furthermore, there were 2 entrances into the mansion from the courtyard, and neither of them were locked. Because the courtyard couldn't be entered from outside the mansion, the doors had been built without locks. He didn't know which one they had left through. He had to give up. Battler pounded the wall with his fists, swearing.
Battler-kun! 一人で先走ってはダメです。Battler-kun.
Battler pressed his forehead against the wall, which he scratched at with his fingernails as he cried.
エヴァおばさんに秀吉おじさん、さらにカノン君かよ。6人も殺しやがった。飽き足らずさらに3人も殺しやがった。ふざけるな、ふざけるな。エヴァおばさんも秀吉おじさんも昔からいつも優しくしてくれる愉快なおばさんたちだったじゃねえかよ。カノン君とは昨日会ったばかりだが、きっとこれから仲良くなれたと思うぜ。なんで殺したんだ。どうして人ってのはな、殺しちまったらな、二度と生き返らねえんだぞ。タケノコみてえにひょいひょい生えてきちゃ来ねえんだぞ。どうして殺すんだよ。どうして
Battler was a boy who could understand the feelings of pain and regret in a person's heart, so he cried with all his strength. Natsui, who had always thought of Battler as a frank person, was a little surprised to find that he had this delicate side, and at the same time she understood how easily hurt the heart of a young person could be, so she held him.
大丈夫です。あなたもジョージ君もマリアちゃんもジェシカも、私母として、そして後宮家の代表として。
Battler, after sobbing into Natsui's chest for a while, wiped his tears with a bitter smile, as though he had been like that the whole time, and tried to appear as though he'd cried more than enough already.
とにかく一度下に戻りましょう。犯人を探すより自分たちの身を守る方が最優先です。明日になれば船が来る。そうすれば警察がやってきて、全てを白日のもとにさらし出してくれるでしょう。犯人がどうあがこうとも、この島から逃げられるものですか。
そうっすね。警察さん来れば。
When the seagulls cry, the crime will be solved. But for some reason, Battler felt a slight sense of uneasiness, as if the seagulls would never cry again. That couldn't be true. When the typhoon passes, surely the lively seagulls will return to the harbor again. I returned to the boiler room along with Aunt Natsui and told everyone weakly that we hadn't found anything. We heard that Dr. Nanjo and George Aniki had carried Kanon-kun to the servants' room. The servant room had a first aid kit and a sink, and could apparently function as a nurse's office. Kumasawa-san and Jessica had accompanied them. Stains from Kanon-kun's blood remained on the floor. Judging by the large amounts of blood loss and the ruthless shape of the weapon that had fallen carelessly to the ground, I figured that Dr. Nanjo's treatment would probably end in vain. That weapon was doubtlessly the same type that had been stuck into Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's foreheads. But wait, isn't the demonic steed's design on the handle a little different? There seemed to be some small differences in that part. Still, as far as their overall shape was concerned, the weapons were all of the same type. Though it had seemed brutal, we'd left the weapons stuck into Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's to reserve the crime. So this is the first time we were able to have a perfect view of the entire weapon. As we had suspected, the weapon was not bladed like a knife, but shaped like an ice pick, or rather a thin stake. And it had a spiral-shaped pattern, sort of like a drill. It looked like something that might be driven into the hearts of human sacrifices in some demonic ritual. Including the handle, it was 25 centimeters long. Half of that was the stake-shaped part, which was stained with deep red blood. The length of the blood-stained part made it clear just how deeply it must have penetrated into Kanon-kun's chest. But Aunt Natsui and the rest didn't even look at the weapon, instead stood in front of the incinerator where the horrible stench was emanating from. They must have dragged out that thing which had been burning in the furnace. It was still smoldering and kept sending out dense waves of that awfully unpleasant smell. Genji-san and Maria stared down at it. Aunt Natsui probably couldn't stand to look directly at it. She kept shaking her back to it. I thought nothing could surprise me after everything that's happened. But this is... I stood there for a while, moaning with a rising urge to vomit. The true source of that unearthly stench was a scorched corpse that had been cooking inside the incinerator. The clothes, the surface of the body, and the hair were all hideously burned. That grotesque corpse was in a state where not the face, nor the age, nor even the gender could be guessed at. But when I thought about it calmly, I realized that a corpse appearing at this time could only be one person. It was Grandfather, who had disappeared that morning and whose whereabouts had been unknown.
おそらく親方様だと思います。
私も同感です。このようなお姿でお亡くなりになるとはおいたわしや。
でもこの死体本当にじい様だって保証はあるんすか？こうも黒焦げじゃ性別さえも想像つかないってのに。
バトラ君、足をご覧なさい。
Bright, I'm nowhere near okay. Aunt Natsui, with her handkerchief over her mouth and her eyes averted, pointed and told me to look at the burnt corpse's feet.
両足の指が6本あるのがお分かりになりませんか？
本当だ。
Just as Genji-san had said, there were 6 toes on each foot. Each individual toe had looked so normal in its line that I hadn't noticed.
親方様はお生まれの時から
That is a random tidbit of knowledge. Thank you, Mr. Genji. It is... The estate was run by a crotchety 12-toed nigga. Okay. Extra toe would have been rotted off and had no bone. I'm just trying to sit here like I know that's possible, because there are people like born with extra appendages. Like, it's not word extra things that they shouldn't have. So I get that it's possible. Just thinking about it, I'm like, was this brought up before? Because this feels like it wasn't.
後ろ宮家には昔から生まれつき多子症の方が多かったそうです。多分遺伝的なものでしょう。
Polydactyly literally means many fingers. Because of a little mistake by God when the person is born, one of their toes or fingers splits in two, and the total number increases. But a big deal isn't usually made of polydactyly in the world at large. That's because it isn't a disease, just something people are born with. So while they're still babies, at about the time they turn 1 year old, they can be taken to the hospital and given surgery to make them normal. Even a child with polydactyly can be treated before they become aware, so they might not even remember it themselves. By the way, it seems that there's a possibility for this to occur in 1 out of every 2,000 babies. So even though it's not usually seen, it isn't that rare at all. Speaking of which, I think Uncle Hideyoshi mentioned something to me long ago. Something about how even Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man who unified Japan at the end of the Sengoku period, had 6 fingers on one hand. According to Aunt Natsui, among the many Ushiromiya family heads, the ones most praised for their wisdom all had polydactyly. Because of that, when grandfather was born, his relatives were all excited at the thought that he might become another wise leader. And when the leading relatives all died in the Great Kanto earthquake, it was apparently argued that grandfather should be the one to restore the family because of the auspicious sign of his birth. If grandfather hadn't disliked his position as the head so much, the 6th toe probably would have been pretty lucky for him. Come to think of it, I've only heard about some country where it's believed people with polydactyly should be treated as gods and revered. This is beside the point, but it's fairly common in mystery novels for a corpse to be burned to hide its identity. But I guess that in grandfather's case, just toasting him wouldn't be enough. And grandfather's body was not simply burnt. It was just like Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi and the thing that had been stabbed into Kanonkun's chest. One of those demon's ice picks was stuck into his forehead.
昨夜の手紙の通りということですか。お父さん、さぞやご無念でしょう。
Natsui-san let her head droop and closed her eyes tightly. This room had also become a vital crime scene for us to hand over to the police. It was decided that we would leave grandfather's corpse here and lock the room, sealing it. It wasn't clear when grandfather's corpse started burning in the incinerator, since according to Genji, the strength of the flames hadn't been that strong. The body must have started burning a long time ago. so that stench could slowly creep out of the furnace and fill the room bit by bit, eventually pouring out and climbing up the staircase. Putting aside whether he was rare or well done, Jesus, Grandfather had been brought out, killed, and burned, even though he had started out locked away in the closed room created by his own auto-lock. There's probably no doubting this. However, according to Genji-san, the boiler room is usually locked. The possibility that someone outside our group had snuck in and committed the crime was overwhelmingly high. And there was also a good chance that this person was walking around with something like a master key. After all, the doors and windows throughout the mansion had been checked. But despite that, the culprit was able to strut around the mansion freely. Shit, the lens fell out again. Well, I'm gonna read with half reading sight. Let's go. Does this crime commit brain? Does this crime confirm that a 19th person exists? There's still that contradiction, since they're trying to tout their existence without ever showing themselves once. Along with Kyrie-san's chessboard theory, I've been using this contradiction to deny the existence of a 19th person, by spinning the chessboard around once more. The very fact that this crime makes it perfectly obvious that a 19th person exists means that the existence of a 19th person is even less plausible. As long as that 19th person doesn't show themselves in front of us. If the culprit could get Grandfather out through the door sealed by the receipt, if they could kill Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi from the other side of the door sealed by a chain, then could they possibly go so far as to create a fictional 19th person through strange tricks and devices? If we still want to believe that the culprit is among the 18, then the list of suspects has grown very short. The four of us kids, Aunt Natsui, Genji-san, Kumasawa Ba-chan, and Dr. Nanjo. One of those people has to be the culprit. Wait, we can't be sure of that. Just a second ago, we started doubting whether the corpse here was actually Grandfather's, right? Maybe we could think of other bodies in the same way. For example, the first 6 all had their faces horribly smashed. Some of the bodies had kept enough of their face to let us confirm who they were, but that old bastard, for example, had lost his entire face, as though the whole thing had been neatly peeled off. We only figured out which body was which by their clothes and surroundings. Did the culprit prepare a fake body beforehand and alter it to make it look like they died, even though they were actually hiding somewhere after committing the crime? It may sound ridiculous, but it wouldn't be an impossible trick to pull off. It's too early to give in to this 19th person. No, this witch.
Maria ちゃん、それ以上しげしげと見てはなりません。さあ、バトラ君も。カノンの容体も気になりますし、いつまでもこのようなところにはいられません。戻りましょう。
Maria didn't go out without everyone else, but remained in the boiler room. The thing she was staring so fixedly at probably wasn't Grandfather's body, but the demon's ice pick sticking out of his forehead. It was probably the sort of item that an enthusiast couldn't bear to ignore. I tapped her on the head.
Oi, Maria. ベアトリーチェの目的は何なんだ？俺たち全員の命か。
There it is. just what's Beatrice after?
ベアトリーチェはもうすぐ蘇るんだよ。
Do it, coward. Do it. Bet you won't.
その時、誰も生き残れはしない。
Just none shall be left alive. Do it. Do it. Just bro, she's back. Everyone's dead. Me. I wasn't looking. The Beatrice comes to life, Battler. I wasn't looking, do it again.
よくも笑えるもんだぜ。自分だけ蚊帳の外だと思ってるのか。どうして自分の身に危機が迫っていると感じない。どうして怯えない。
ベアトリーチェは約束してくれたもん。マリアは黄金鏡へ連れて行ってもらえるんだよ。そこはね、しがらみも何もない全ての人たちがずっと一緒にいつまでも優しくし合っていける素敵な場所なんだよ。
Maria's gonna get it the worst out of everyone. I'm already... She's gonna get it the worst. I feel it.
マリアは楽しみだよ。その時はもうすぐだもん。
Just what kind of person is Maria? I only know what Maria was like 6 years ago when she was 3. She was once a pure and obedient, a good kid. This new Maria 6 years later and the Maria I knew didn't seem to fit together. Just who is she, this witch who calls herself Maria? To Maria, who obstinately believes in the witch, this series of unsolvable crimes is proof that the witch actually exists. Every time something occurs that would be difficult for a human, it becomes a little harder for the rest of us to not believe in Beatrice. It must be an intense pleasure for Maria to see her relatives, who once firmly denied the witch's existence, start acknowledging that witch's existence one by one. Is that why she's in high spirits?
マリア、もう一遍だけ聞く。どうせ答えは同じだろうが、もう一遍だけ聞く。お前は昨日バラ庭園で手紙をもらった。そいつは誰なんだ。
おお、だからベアトリーチェ。バトラがまだ信じない。おお。
Maria only repeated what she had already said. Maria met with the 19th person, the witch. Was that really a 19th person, or did one of the 18 just get her to say that? It's that all that's certain is that Maria has been with the rest of us constantly, has always had an alibi, and hasn't done anything suspicious physically. She's simply overjoyed at being made Beatrice's messenger, and certainly isn't the 19th person, supposedly. That's right. I wonder what's written in the letter we picked up on Aunt Eva and Uncle Hideyoshi's room. Aunt Natsui should still have it with her. High key, I was expecting it to go on for like a... Jesus fucking Christ, that clock's so... The end, Umineko ends like that. We're still on episode 1. I like it. Well, to kind of keep, yeah, because I am trying to keep this more consistent. I guess with that's the end of. It's the end of at least this part. Loki thought it was the last stream of it ever when I glanced at the title. Oh no, it's not. It's not. We're still on episode 1. There's 8 episodes. I'm not. the reason I chose to only really stream this for most of October is because, like, as of currently, like, if I open my Steam right now and then proceed to show you how long I've been on episode 1, and this has been every stream I've done of it. Okay, not the actual game, Steam. Peep the playtime. When I close this game, it is going to go up by 2 hours. But just look at the playtime of 24.1 hours on episode 1. We're nowhere near done. Which is why I took like a 2 to 3 month hiatus, because I got the feeling, man, it's gonna be 30 plus hours and I'm still gonna not have finished episode 1. And so far, I'm feeling right, and this is one of the worst times I could be right, because I'm interested, but I also want to move forward. So hang on, let me do the thing real quick. OBS, would you let me type the words? Thank you. Now, I could probably just make like another word prompt, but I genuinely don't feel like it. So thanks for coming out. Next Friday, I don't know if I'm gonna stream before next Friday next week. Solely because my schedule's slightly different, because Wednesday is my day off because I have jury duty that day, and I don't know if I'll feel like streaming. But next Friday won't be Umineko. Like, Umineko will still continue, albeit infrequently. It won't be as consistent, which is solely for me. I genuinely cannot stream this super consistently. Like, it's very hard for me to keep up with. But thank you guys for coming out, and hopefully I'll see you next time.